Hey guys, thanks for coming to this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we're going to be showing you how to create this. Essentially, it is a stack of views that when you click on one of them, it expands outwards, okay? And if you click on one that goes past the size of the screen, so for instance, this has 4 pictures, we can actually scroll through them, okay? And then you can just click up here to get rid of that. All right, and so that's it, okay? So before we get into that, I just want to make sure you guys know about this intermediate and advanced skills playlist. And it essentially is a culmination of the more advanced things that I've created, including sliding menus. This seems to be pretty popular, which is the App Store mimic, radar charts, but just a bunch of concepts that kind of take you to the next level. So please feel free to check this out. And if you haven't already, I would always appreciate a subscribe. I know it only takes one more second. It's just another channel, but it helps me grow and help people like you. All right, guys, so with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be working kind of back and forth between the actual finished product and then also making it together, okay? Just because, it took a while to develop it and we don't want to make some of the same mistakes twice. So I'm going to start a new project here. I'm going to call this one single view app. Okay, it's going to be code tutorials underscore, and we'll call this fanning stack. Okay. Now I'll put on the desktop code tutorial underscore fanning stack. Okay, I'm going to create it. And first thing I'm going to do, to be honest with you, is I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the navigation on the left and this sidebar on the right. And looking at what we have here, first thing we need to do is we need to create a new structure called the stackable item. Okay, and my stackable item, I make it identifiable. I make all my structs identifiable. And if you think that's a bad idea, please let me know in the comment section below. To date, I've never had an issue with it, and I know that it's really good when you start looping through things with a for each loop. Okay, you can't really do for each loops and then change the array that is being used or the list of things that is being used to create the views in a for each loop, unless those items are identifiable. From my experience, that has been the most important way to do it. Otherwise, it has no way of really updating it in real time. You'll get some errors. So I made a stackable item, okay? And then I'm going to start by adding a couple different things to my project. I need to create a new gesture state variable inside of content view. Okay, so if your project looks like mine, you should have this, and you should have content view with gesture state. Okay, and it'll be a private variable called drag state, and it'll be of type drag state dot inactive. Now, what is drag state dot inactive? It's something I've been using in a lot of my videos. So it's going to be an enum that I'm going to copy and paste over. Okay, so it is all of this, and we can walk through it. Essentially, it's an enum that it'll give you whether this drag state is inactive, whether it's dragging, and it'll help you track the translation of it and whether you're currently dragging or not. Okay, and so I would just kind of make sure yours looks exactly like this. I'm going to re-indent everything, so I'm going to click Control I. That way you see the proper hierarchy here. Okay, and that's what the drag state looks like, that enum. Okay, so I scroll back up, and if you look in Content View, I'm going to go ahead and code fold that by clicking Command Option Left. That gets that away, and now we have less to look at. So in the content view, I have a gesture state. It's a variable called drag state, and it's going to be equal to drag state dot inactive. Okay, so working my way back up to the top here. The next thing I need to do is I need to create the list of items that are in here. So what is this? This variable essentially is saying I want something called item stacks, and it's going to be an array of arrays. Okay, so each inner array is the list of photos, and the outer array is the list of stacks. So I have 3 stacks. 3 pics of Stockholm, 3 pics of Paris, and 3 pics of Istanbul. So I picked random images off of the internet. So I just went ahead and picked random images and tossed them into my assets library. So that's what Istanbul 1, 2, 3, 4, Paris 1, 2, 3, 4, and Stockholm 1, 2, 3. Oh, I had 4 of Paris. I didn't realize that. So if I go back here, what you'll see is I had essentially each stackable item. It's essentially 3 arrays of stackable items all bunched into one array, okay? And the only thing in here is the image name, okay? And that string is equal to the name of the file that you saw in my image assets file or folder, okay? And I need 4 more variables, sorry. I need to know the item spacing, okay? I need to know the stack item height, and I need to know the first animation duration. So the duration will dictate this speed, okay? So it's going to be 0.3 seconds to do all that. The stack item height is going to be dictating this size right here. So this is 170, okay? And the spacing is 60. That's the space between them, okay? So I dictate them out here so I don't have to keep writing 60 and 170, and if I change those numbers throughout, I don't have to go find them. I just can change them on the outside level. So I'm going to copy all 4 of those variables out there, okay? So this is the one we're working on together. It says code tutorials underscore fanning stack. Okay, so those are the extra variables. So item spacing, stack item height, and first animation duration, and my state variable for expanded stack, okay? Let me make sure I bring over my content. So you're going to have to create your own here based on the name of the images you choose. So these are my 3 stacks, and each stack has these images. Okay. And I'm going to put that right here. So the last thing was this state variable expanded stack. And so right now it's an integer, and it's by default it's going to be an optional integer that's going to be equal to nothing at startup. Because right now I haven't picked a stack to expand. So at startup it's going to be equal to nil. None of these are chosen. And when I click one, we actually change that to be, maybe that's stack 0 or stack 1 or stack 2. And that's what dictates whether or not these fan out. Okay, so I'm going to close that. All right, so I'll save that. And now let's look at the next piece. So working our way inside here, this is the beast of the code, okay? So we need a few different functions in here. We're going to need a function that gets the rotation of each of these, okay? And the rotation will be based off of the stack index and the item index. So stack index means which one of these stacks is that picture in, and the item index is where in that stack is that picture. Okay, so that's what stack index and item index is. So that's the first function. Okay, so let's talk about what's in it. We're saying get rotation based off of stack index and item index, and we're saying if the stack index is equal to the expanded stack, then return 0. And if it's not, then return, we don't even need this. Okay, all we need is this right here. Return a double that is somewhere between a random double between -10 and +10. Okay, so what this is saying is when we run through a for each loop later on, what you're going to see is that we're passing through which stack each of these images in, and we're saying if the image is in the stack that is currently being selected, then simply just return 0. Otherwise, make it, give it a random rotation. So what that's saying is right now none of them are chosen. So that statement is never true, which means all of them have a random rotation. But when I click on one, all the other ones are hidden, and the ones that are present now abide by this statement, meaning that they have no rotation. And that's how they're perfectly straight up and down. Okay? So that's that function. Now let's look at get vertical offset. Get stack vertical offset. Okay? I'm going to copy that over and discuss it. So the get stack vertical offset, essentially what that's doing is it's deciding the offset of each stack when it's not expanded, okay? And it's saying that, if expanded stack equals nil, meaning we haven't picked a stack yet, then return its proper height, its offset, okay? But if we have picked one, then they should all technically be 0 because they're all going to go all the way to the top, as you can see here. But then each individual image will have its own offset vertically, okay? So that's that one. And then the next function we'll bring over is the get card vertical offset. And so that function is responsible for, let's go, this is the project we're working on here, code tutorials underscore fanning stack. And that function is responsible for the vertical offset once you've picked one and expanded it, okay? So that sets the offset of each individual image. Otherwise, they're all 0, and the offset is just dictated by the stack's offset, okay? So now that we got those down, let's go ahead and create the body of this. So looking at this finished code, what we can see is that the entire thing is embedded in a Z-stack with some padding. So I'm going to go ahead and close this canvas right here, and I'm going to see how small this goes. I don't think this goes too small, so no sense in trying to minimize and putting the two side by side. So we have the whole thing in a Z-stack that has padding. Okay, so here's ours. So we're going to make a Z-stack. Okay, and we're going to give it some padding. Okay, and then inside of that we have a V-stack and a scroll view. So the scroll view is what's creating each of these items, and the V-stack is going to be responsible purely for this X, and that is why it's literally on top. Okay, so one thing I need to do before I forget is I need to copy my images over. So I'm going to go to my asset library. Okay, sorry, here's my asset library. I'm going to bring those images over, and for you probably just downloaded them from the internet or something like that. So there's my images. I'm going to make sure they're in both places. So now I have my images in both places, okay? So now in both of them, I'm going to go back to the content view. Okay. So inside of the Z-stack, we should have our scroll view and our V-stack. Okay, and make sure, by the way, your images, sorry, going back to that, your images, the names need to match up to the names that you put here, okay? So we have a V-stack. Let's go ahead and create that V-stack really quick. So we have first our V-stack. The V-stack itself is gonna have an H-stack within it, okay? And then inside of that H-stack, I'm just gonna copy the one crucial piece, is this right here. Let's talk about what that is. We're saying that if the expanded stack is not equal to nil, meaning we've selected an expanded stack, then create a button that looks like an image with the SF symbol X mark, okay? And the action of that will be to set the expanded stack back to nil. So when we click it, we're unchoosing an expanded stack, okay? And the next piece here is I want to push that X all the way to the right-hand side. So I'll put the spacer right here because this is almost the red as in left to right, okay? And then I want to shove it all the way to the top, so I'll put this underneath. Okay? And so that creates this button, and that's that. Now we need to move on to the scroll view. Okay. So this is the code we're working on, don't forget. I know I keep saying that, but it's just good to keep that in mind. So trials is the finished product that we're dissecting, and code tutorials fanny stack is what we're creating together. So I'm going to close that up so we can look at the scroll view, okay? It is definitely a beast. So let's go ahead and break it up into smaller components the way we're doing, the way we've been doing it. So inside the scroll view, first thing we have is an H stack with text that says memories and a spacer that shoves it to the left and padding on either side horizontally. So I'll copy that over and I should have that right here. And I'll open the canvas now. Oh, sorry, this is not the canvas. Here's the canvas. Okay, and this is the one we're working on together. So resume. Okay, and we should see the text. And it should be big text and it should be bolded, okay? And that spacer is what's shoving it to the left because this is read left to right. And then we're giving it padding. Specifically, we're giving it horizontal padding of 30 on each side. There you have it, okay? Because there's the padding. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and minimize that H stack so we can look at less things. Okay. And just so we keep in mind, this is just the X button. Okay. Now, looking here, let's look what's underneath here. So inside the scroll view, underneath the H stack, now we have this huge Z stack, okay? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that Z stack. It's within the scroll view, so Z stack. Okay, and the Z stack is going to have a width of UI screen.main.bounds.width. Okay? And now, let's go ahead and look inside of that Z-stack. So inside the Z-stack, we have a couple different things. Opening it up, we made sure already that the Z-stack has the proper width. So inside of it, we have a for each. Okay, so let's create the same for each. So for each, okay, and it's going to say for each, and we're going to run through all the items in the item stack variable. Now, item stacks variable. So what that says is for each from 0 ... up to the count, not including, so less than, not less than or equal to, the item stocks.count, create the following things. And we're going to run through the indices using I for this closure, so I in. And then we open that up, and what do we have? We create a VStack. Okay, let's write that. VStack. Okay. And this is our first big thing we have. So we're going to be animating the opacity based on whether or not this is the stack we're looking for. So what does that look like and what does it mean? Whenever I click on this stack right here, the other two hide, right? So I click on this one and the other two, technically the other two move up and become completely transparent. So they're still here, they're just completely transparent and they're directly behind this. Then I go like this and they come right back. So I say VStack, okay? And then I put inside, or up underneath it, I put the opacity. We use the ternary operator here. So the ternary operator is saying if you can satisfy one of these two constraints, okay, if one of those two is true, then the opacity is 1. And if it's not, then the opacity is 0. So if the current stack is equal to the expanded stack, or if the expanded stack is set to nothing, then give me an opacity of 1. Otherwise, give me an opacity of 0. So either we're in this view and all three of them have an opacity of 1, or we're in this view and only the items in the current stack have or the current stack and its subviews have an opacity of 1. Everything else has an opacity of 0. Okay, that makes sense. The next piece then is just an animation. So we're saying give us an animation of ease in, okay, put them on the same line, of ease in, ease out, okay, with a duration of self.first animation duration, which was 0.3, which we set up earlier. So that's right there. Okay, we're making headway. Now we have, just to complete, between 59 and 94. We have only a few more lines here. So I'll fold that code so we can look inside here. So inside this VStack, we have the following things. We have a spacer with a frame height of 30. Okay, that's just for the sake of aesthetics. You can change that to whatever you want. I would recommend you finish all the way through and maybe change that after and kind of fiddle with it. Okay, and then the next thing is another spacer. Now this spacer is not optional. This spacer is essentially, it's what's setting, if you remember, all three of these stacks are not technically vertically stacked on top of each other. They're actually stacked in a Z stack, but then they are pushed downwards in their appropriate, I would say in their appropriate distance. So for instance, this right here is saying the stack of the thing that is pushing it down, the height of it, so the height of the spacer that is pushing it down, its height is equal to the output of this function. So get stack underscore vertical offset. And so what we're saying is we're going to ignore this piece right here. This get stack return 0. What this half is saying is just saying that whenever I choose a stack, bring all of them back to the top, okay, and set the opacity. And don't forget that we already had the opacity portion, and the opacity portion was set to 0. Whenever we're dealing with a stack, that's not the one that's chosen. So what we're saying now is we're really focusing on this part here. And what it's saying is if we haven't chosen any stack, then all three stacks need to be visible, and their offset in the vertical dimension needs to be equal to their stack index multiplied by the item spacing, so this distance, plus the stack height. So for instance, this is the 0th element, so it's 0 times 170 plus 60. So that's why it's right here. The next one is 1 times 170 plus 60, so it's right here. And the next one is 2 times 170 plus 60, and that's why it's right here. But when I pick one, they all go to the top and just hide in the background, or they fade out. Okay, so that's what the get vertical offset, that's how that's being used. Let's look at the next piece. The next thing I'm actually going to do, I'm going to put that spacer on the bottom, which shoves everything back up to the top. So I'm going to put that right there. And then now we have to deal with the Z stack and its gesture. So let's deal with, this guy is 17 lines and this one's 13 lines. So let's deal with the gesture first, okay? So first I'm just gonna write the Z stack, okay? And inside of it, I'm just gonna put a text, okay? It's gonna say A. And we will go through and put the proper things in it in a moment. But for now, let's work on the gesture. So dot gesture, okay? Now let's look at what's inside this gesture. So inside the gesture, we have a drag distance, or drag gesture, okay? And its minimum distance is going to be equal to its minimum distance is going to be a ternary operator that will be based off of self.expanded stack being equal to 0. And what we're saying here essentially is recognize a drag gesture starting, so when we say that the minimum distance is equal to 0, what we're saying is you can recognize even a tap. And we're saying that the minimum distance is 3,000 or something absurd. I can even make it 30,000. The point is that it's huge. When I make that number huge, we're saying never recognize a drag gesture because you're never going to drag a 3,000 minimum distance of 30,000, even 3,000. You're never going to drag that. Maybe on an iPad, but not on an iPhone. So when I make it 30,000, what I'm trying to say here essentially is only recognize a drag gesture if self.expanded is equal to 0. So the next piece, coordinate space.global. It's something I just always put in there. I didn't have a reason not to put it. So if you have a reason not to put it, feel free to do so. So I'm going to bring that over, and I'm going to put that in here. So we have a drag gesture with a minimum distance of self.expanded stack, okay? And it's going to be equal to 0 if self.expanded stack is equal to 0, and it's going to be 30,000 if it's not. Okay, and the only thing we need to now add here is, look here, on ended. So we need to decide what happens when you end the drag, okay? And I like to use the curly brackets. So on ended, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to be able to reference all the data in here using value. That's what I'm going to use to reference within my closure. Okay, and I want to define the start location as the start location. The end location is just value dot location. Okay, remember value is just this. And that's how we're referencing essentially the drag gesture in this closure. And the only reason I'm doing that is so I can then use it below here, where what I'm doing here is I'm checking how far we've dragged. And what I'm saying is if the absolute difference of the location in the x direction and the location in the y direction are both less than 10, meaning that I pressed and did not drag more than 10 pixels in either dimension, I must have been tapping. Otherwise, I must not have been tapping. So I will only carry on forward if I have not dragged more than 10 pixels in either direction, therefore recognizing a tap using a drag gesture. Okay? Now, why do I use this instead of just a tap gesture? Well, I use this because technically this will allow me to understand the location of the tap itself. Do I technically need to do it in this case? No, I don't necessarily need to do it. And there may even be good arguments against doing it, but the reason I did it is actually based off of a different project that I had in the intermediate and forum series, where I went and showed how to tap anywhere on the screen and create a new view if there was no view already there, but to drag one if there was. So let's go ahead and copy these pieces. Okay, and what that's saying, quite simply, is if we do recognize technically a tap and not a drag, then I'm going to set the expanded stack. This is where we set the expanded stack equal to the stack we pressed on. It's going to be equal to I. Okay, and that is the meat of that. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. We have 17 more lines here and we are done. Okay. Z stack. So inside that Z stack now, I'm going to do another for each. Okay. For each. And now this for each, I'm going to copy it and we'll talk about it. Okay. This for each now is running through each item in each stack. So when I do the first one, I'm running through 1, 2, 3 stacks. And now for each of those, I'm running through their items, these stackable items. So I'm going to refer to each item, or the index of each item using J in the closure. Okay, now I open the VStack, and each time I run through it, I'm going to create a VStack. So let's create that VStack. Okay, and each VStack is going to have one thing, or three things. One is the spacer, okay, and that spacer is going to run, it's going to have a height based on the get card vertical offset, okay? And it's quite similar to the function for get stack vertical offset, but the difference here is that essentially the offset of each card will be 0 until that stack is chosen, and at which point its offset will actually be equal to its item index multiplied by the item spacing. So that's what allows it to be 0. All the items in the stack have an offset of 0 here, but now they all have an offset that is equal to, same principle, the stack height multiplied by, plus the spacing multiplied by the item's index, okay? And so that's how we did that. So that's what that line is. Okay, and then we need to put the actual image. So I'm going to put the image, and we'll talk about each piece. I know that seems like a mouthful all at once, okay? So we have an image. What image is it, or what is the reference for the image? It's going to be the image that is the image with the name that is equal to the item that we can find as the jth element in the ith stack within the item stack array, okay? So this essentially is acting like a map. It's saying item stacks, look for stack number I, item number J, find out what the image name attribute is, and get that image, okay? We want to make sure that the image is resizable. We want to make sure it's scaled to fit. That's how it looks this nice. We want to give it a max height equal to the stack item height, okay? And we want to make sure that it is clipped, and that's how we make sure we don't have anything spilling off the screen. We give it an offset. So first thing to realize is we're going to give it an overlay. I'm going to come back to the offset, but we're going to give it an overlay of the white rectangle, which makes it look like a photo. We're going to give it a shadow right here that has it's 0.2. It's black, but has an opacity of 0.2 and a radius of 3. And it has a rotation effect. Okay, and that rotation effect is running through the rotation effect function we described earlier. That's what's giving it all these turns. Now, what is the point of the offset? So technically, if you can imagine, if I have this rotation and I toss onto it the shadow, they will all seesaw with one common point where all the shadows will add up and you'll get this really dark spot. So by giving a random offset of -3 to +3, it's something so subtle that your eye won't really see that it's there, but it's just enough to prevent all of the shadows from adding up at that crucial point. So I save that, okay, and that's the rotation. Everything looks good in there. So the last thing I need to do is just add a spacer, because what will happen is if I don't have that spacer, remember the spacer comes at the bottom in either case of those 4 eaches because it pushes everything to the top. Otherwise, watch what happens when I do that, when I don't have it. They don't do anything in particular, but when I give them the spacer right underneath, it gives them a little nudge to all go in the right spot. So now when I pick it, everything goes to its proper location. Okay, and that's that. So that's how you create the entire thing from start to finish. Thank you guys for watching. I know this was a long one, but I hope it was worth it. And please, if this was helpful to you, I always appreciate it. Subscribe, and please feel free to check out the intermediate playlist. The link should be in the description below. There's a lot of intermediate and advanced things kind of like this, where I try to go into how to create really complex UIs, because I actually think that the barrier of entry to learning SwiftUI is a little high because you're so used to UIKit, but it's actually a lot easier when you take the time. Another thing I think is really important is getting used to and familiar with using drag gestures and Z stacking. Some people may say this might not be the cleanest or most intuitive way to do it, but I'd venture to guess that they can't create things that are this easy to use and this accessible, because now I can take this entire thing and I can essentially create this view. I can create these anywhere I want just by just by creating the item stacks list, and I can just toss it in. So thank you for watching, and I hope this was helpful. And please leave me a comment below if you have any questions. All right, see you guys.